Hey everyone, I'm Bishop Trevor, and this is the Discipleship Moment. And today I'm not going to talk so much about practices of Jesus that we want to emulate, that he has modeled for us. Today I want to talk about some of the resources that have influenced me in developing a discipleship strategy, understanding more clearly some of the practices of Christ within the context of leadership and the church life. And I want to share with you some books. So one is by Dan Spader. It's called The Four-Chair Discipling. This is a great book. In fact, I'm hoping in the very near future to be reviewing this with several of our pastors. And so this gives a great overview of the life of Jesus and how he modeled discipleship, and then consequently how we can follow his example. This is by Bill Hull and Ben Sobels, The Discipleship Gospel. First of all, Bill Hull. Anything Bill Hull writes, I kind of think you need to get a hold of it. He's constantly writing about disciple making, discipleship, discipleship church, disciple making pastor, blase, blase. He's writing on it, and I'd encourage you to. Now, he calls us to revisit the gospel, and he rightly addresses the fact that we have kind of limited the gospel to merely a few statements about Jesus' death and resurrection. And this leads to a forgiveness gospel, but not a gospel of the kingdom. And he transitions from the gospel of the kingdom to a gospel of the kingdom that makes the disciples that are just like Jesus, and how we as leaders can develop those disciples. So this is a foundational book. Highly encourage you to get it for every leader. Now, Greg Ogden, his book, Transforming Discipleship, Making Disciples a Few at a Time. His process is probably what I've used the most in we call them microgroups. And so he's probably been one of my biggest influencers in my actual strategy. And I'd encourage you to get this book. It will help you not just develop a large perspective strategy, but exactly what to do in your small group or how to start them so that you can make disciples. Great book. Now, this one here is by Jim Putnam. This is really, when we were pastoring, he is the one who helped us shift towards a disciple-making philosophy in our church. And so I highly advise that you get a copy of this. In fact, this one, Disciple-Making Culture, comes from one of his leaders. And so I think this is one of the last ones you get, because all of these are about starting the process of disciple making philosophically, strategically. And then this one is talking about embedding the culture in our church as we strive to be disciples. So this is one of the last ones I would suggest to get after you have come to grips with your actual process. And so I want you to know, if I'm teaching a course, all of these would be in a course on disciple making, and they are foundational. You must understand the culture of a disciple-making congregation. You must understand the shifts that must take place if we're to move from a program-based church to a discipleship church, a disciple-making church based on relationships. We need to understand the nuts and bolts of small groups, effective disciple-making small groups, because you can have many small groups, but they may not be making disciples. They may be caring for people and making them feel appreciated and valued, but they may not be making disciples as Jesus has commissioned the church to. And then we have the discipleship gospel. And this is at the beginning where we need to understand the gospel you preach determines the disciples that you make. That's Bill Hull's phrase, and I totally agree with it. And he helps us see that we've got to get the gospel settled. And I know you say, well, I know the gospel. No, you got to understand the gospel from the beginning of the Bible to the end. And then 4-chair discipling. I just think this is a very simple book that pastors and youth leaders, in fact, in February, I'm hoping to bring a set of youth leaders with me to Dan Spader's training on disciple making youth ministry. And it's just very simple. And it's talking about how Jesus modeled the life that we ought to live as disciples. And that model helps us understand how to make disciples of others. Very simple, very easy to understand. It gives a good grounding in theology, gives us a great understanding of the life of Jesus, and then how that life leads to our lifestyle as disciples who make disciples. So these are 5 books that are foundational to disciple making and to developing a discipleship philosophy within the local church and as a pastor and as a leader. And I highly encourage you to get them. Any one of them you can begin with first. I suggest this would be one of the later ones, but get them all, and all of them will help shape you as you are going through the Word of God, following Christ, and becoming a disciple who makes disciples. I am Bishop Trevor, and this is a Discipleship Moment.